Next month, all public schools in Hawaii will return to in-person instruction for all grade levels. This comes after students spent this past school year doing some form of distance learning. Teachers were one of the first groups to be vaccinated, and shots are now available for kids 12 and older. So what will classrooms look like in August? Will there still be social distancing? What about mask wearing? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Yanji Denise. Back in May, the Department of Education announced that public schools would resume a full in-person learning schedule that would also include extracurricular activities like athletics, clubs, and band. Outgoing DOE Superintendent Dr. Christina Kishimoto, who declined to participate tonight, says the decision was made in part due to vaccines being available for students 12 and up and ongoing safety protocols. But some parents and education advocates have expressed frustration that distance learning or a hybrid schedule are not being offered by the DOE for parents, students, and teachers who may not feel comfortable being back on campus. Tonight, our panel will discuss what options, if any, are available. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our guests. Catherine Payne is the chair of the Hawaii Board of Education. She is a retired educator whose career spanned more than 35 years. Prior to retiring, she was the principal at Farrington High School. Osa Tui Jr. is the incoming president of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. He's a former math teacher at his alma mater, Castle High School, as well as McKinley High School, where he was also the registrar. HSTA represents more than 13,000 public school teachers statewide. Elisa Bender is the principal at Aiea Intermediate School. She served as interim assistant superintendent last year, and before that was the principal of Hickam Elementary School. During her tenure, Hickam Elementary was recognized as a National Blue Ribbon School. And David Miyashiro is the founding executive director of the nonprofit Hawaii Kids Can. He holds a master's degree in special education and is a former teacher at Wahiawa Middle School. Hawaii Kids Can works to partner with families and community members to promote educational equity in Hawaii. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is such an important topic. Elisa, I want to start with you. Let's walk through some of the protocols for those first few weeks of school. A lot of parents, as we noted, are not used to having kids back in the classroom because we've spent a year doing distance learning. So tell us, what are the protocols in place when it comes to masks, social distancing? What's school going to look like?
For us, we really are looking at what are the guidelines and what we can do to work with the Department of Health on what is considered safe and what needs to happen for our school and our students. We've been having this ongoing conversation about, really what is acceptable social distance. And then we also feel that for right now, until we get more information or the vaccines are more effectively sent out throughout our population, it'd be good for us to continue using the mask.
So masks will be in place, but on that social distancing question, I know that it'll probably vary school to school. There was talk of 6 feet, then 3 feet. Are there guidelines or mandates, or is it just sort of whatever is possible?
I think what we want to do is just make sure we're safe. We're looking at it from what's been shared with us is that, it can be up to 3 feet if we are doing things with our mask on. And then, the considerations of what's happening when we have without our masks. And I also think that the coming with the vaccination, we just had a vaccination clinic at our school for 12 and up. That really helped with us making sure that we are getting to a place where there's safety and that there's other safety mitigation efforts in place.
Oh, so let's get to you from a teacher's perspective. What are you hearing from your members? How do they feel about going back to full in-person learning?
Well, our teachers have wanted to be with our students ever since last year. It's really been difficult teaching during this virtual period, but we want to also be safe, and we want to make sure that our students are safe. Our student safety is our number one priority, and we want to make sure that our teachers are supported and have everything that they need to make sure that their students can be safe. The masks, PPE, all of those kinds of things, because the pandemic is still here. It's not over. So we need to make sure that we're as safe as possible and that our administrators and leadership support what they need to do to keep their students safe.
Have you heard from members who say they do not want to go back into the classroom, and are there options for them if they don't want to go back?
So there are some members who do not want to go. You know, they have maybe medically fragile family members that they live with. The department does have a telework program, and I'll just leave it at that because, you know, it's hard to get. Let's just say it's kind of like a lottery.
Catherine, what's the board's take on options for distance learning? Do you think that there should be more of them? What about families who have this concern?
Well, at our meeting in June, the board discussed a resolution that included a number of things for the opening of school, including distance learning. We will be discussing it further at our meeting on the 15th of July and actually voting on it at that time. And we have gotten a lot of testimony and letters to the board from families and parents who really are asking for us to have some kind of an option in our system. What the board will be voting on, so I can't speak to what we've decided yet, but personally, I've spoken with the superintendent over the last few months about the need to have some level of options for parents, not at every school. We understand that there are difficulties in some schools with staffing. However, certainly within complexes, there should be options available for specific situations. We still have 4 out of 10 people in our community who've not been vaccinated. We have all of our elementary children have not been vaccinated, and we don't have data on our teachers and our students in our schools. So there's a risk there. And my concern is that if we don't have some sort of option and we aren't prepared to provide options, then we could be in the same situation of not being ready for whatever comes up. And we just need to look around the world and see that things are not going really well with this pandemic, and we need to be prepared. Certainly the best place for children to learn is in the classroom, and we want as many who can be there as possible. But I believe the board will be I know the board will be talking about what options we can expect from the department. And some schools are already going into hybrid models. They've asked to do this as part of their design, and some schools are already planning for distance learning. So I think we need to just make sure that that option is available for all students who really, really need it, and that we don't just have a default of go to homeschooling if you can't be accommodated in the way we're doing it in our school. There needs to be some flexibility for parents. I don't expect a lot, but some will need it.
I want to stick with you for just a second and ask a little bit more about what you could actually do from the board's perspective. Could the board mandate that kind of option be put in place? What kind of a resolution are you looking at?
It is actually within the board's policy division, and a resolution is sort of an interim policy, and so we can do that, yes.
Okay. David, I want to get to you. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, for those who might not be familiar with what Hawaii Kids Can does for students and families, and talk a little bit about learning loss and what you've been hearing, as Catherine noted, we all want kids to be back in person if possible, and what the effect has been over the last year.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yunji. I actually started this organization after being a teacher and realizing that so many of our educators and our students have great ideas, and a lot of times we just don't feel included in the process. And so I actually, went through a career in politics and in government so I could learn how these systems work. And so with our organization, we really try to merge and bridge that gap that I saw every day as a teacher. So we've been talking to a lot of experts, students, parents, families, teachers. And it's really important to first start from a place of empathy. I talked to an expert who works in the area of trauma, and he said it's not just as simple as a light switch that you flick and then everybody is back in person, right? It's a process, and people have been scared and traumatized, kids and adults alike, over the last year. And so we need to really recognize that and work with folks and have patience as we get back to some sense of normal. When I think about what our kids have been through, I think for a lot of kids, it's been incredibly difficult. The latest numbers to the Board of Education from the department show that 30% of vulnerable students were at risk of chronic absenteeism this year. And so that gap is wide. That could range from kids who missed 15 days of school to some kids who maybe didn't show up after day one. So we have to recognize that we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to this recovery. We have to build on the assets in our community and really listen to and support our families and our kids because this is going to be a process again, and we need to lead with empathy.
Well, Alyssa, I think David raises a really good point about just the varied experience. You have some kids who didn't go to school at all, and you have some kids who were really on it and in every Zoom meeting. So what is the Department of Education and what can individual teachers do to kind of bring everyone up to speed? It's got to be a challenge for the educators as well because they're going to have such a diverse classroom in terms of just, ability.
When you're talking about how we're going to open, I think this has been a time period where we really need to plan and really think through taking a step back, what we need to do for our system. We've been talking a lot about making sure that safety's in place, number one. And then we have to really think about how are we going to address the learning that has been disrupted, right? Or incomplete or was lacking that support that we usually have when we are in person. So we're talking about accelerating learning, and accelerating has it's complex, but I think we could break it down and make it possible for us to go forward and do something about the learning. I think talking to what David was looking at, really have to look at how we can involve trauma-informed practices, really addressing our children, what happened socially, emotionally, and the mental health end of everything for our students, as well as our faculty and staff, our teachers, what happened there. And when Osa was talking about, teachers are concerned, there was real anxiety, there is real compassion fatigue that really happened. There was actually some kinds of fear that happened through the time period, and we really do have to address that. And then I think the other thing is, during this time period, what we should be really looking at also is, we saw that there was some gaps, some inequalities, some things that need to be, that were highlighted during this time. And we need to open better. We need to consider where in our system, what do we need to do to ensure that there's equity, these things that we knew that were important. And very much so, I agree with David, really looking at being an empathetic voice and empathetic listening.
I want to stick with you for just a second. If you could just walk us through, the first week of school and there's a COVID positive test. Let's say it's a student. What are the protocols? Are students being kept in some kind of a cohort so that they're only in a pod, if you will? Or, how does that actually work? Will all the students be sent home? Does the teacher get sent home? What happens if you have a positive case in school?
We've been strangely good at looking at being, in a sense, contact tracers. What we try to do is try to understand, once we get the case, our complex, we have agreements that we talk to each other about, if they're siblings or whatnot, and then we try to find out where was that child and when did the positive test come from. And then we start to look at what needs to be taken care of in terms of cleaning. And then we just try to determine, which students do we need to inform, or teachers do we need to inform that we need to have them be checked for quarantine. That's how we did it, back on the last semester. I don't know if there will be better protocols as we go forward, but the main thing is to make sure that we're safe and that we actually figure out ways to make sure we communicate to our families and to our children about how they should be safer once we know about a case.
Osa, I know that, a lot of students will not be vaccinated, but of course the teachers have the ability to get the vaccine. They are over 12, obviously. Do you know what percentage of your members have been vaccinated?
Actually, we had polled our members in early February, and 70% of them, and vast majority replied, said that they were either starting the vaccination or on their way to get vaccinated. So by now, we anticipated that it's much higher, and we're very grateful that we were able to be in the tier 2 to get those vaccinations. We know that in other states, teachers were not prioritized, and so we're very grateful for that.
Do you think that your organization would accept as a condition of work that it be mandatory for an educator to be vaccinated?
You know, there are reasons why some people cannot get vaccinated, and we understand that, but it wouldn't make sense for all teachers to have to be vaccinated if all students didn't have to be vaccinated, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. So we're just going to have to work with that.
Catherine, what's your take on that? There's a question here from Jeff, and we encourage our viewers, of course, to send in your questions and to call in. Jeff writes via email, just like other vaccines, why not require COVID vaccinations for attendance for 12 and up, like high schools? What's the board's take on that?
Well, right now the vaccine is not, it's in an emergency authorization stage. And so it's not possible to require a vaccine when it's in that particular category. And it's up to the Department of Health to determine what vaccines are required of students. It's not a board policy decision at all. So just as so many of the things, we've had lots of testimony from folks who feel like we shouldn't have masks, we should have masks, you know, and just people that are polar opposites on what they think we should be doing health-wise. It's really important for people to understand that what we do is what is recommended or directed by the Department of Health, because we're not health providers, we are implementers of a service, and we need to have the health department guide us on that. We do think that there may be some loosening of the outdoor masking requirements of everybody, and I'm hopeful for that because I think it's, you know, the kids are outside, it's not as much of a risk, but I do expect that wearing masks in the classroom will continue for the future as we see it.
David, what's your take on mandatory vaccinations for students or for teachers?
And I think it's really important to listen to what families want. And actually it gets to a point that I wanted to reemphasize. When we think about the options that are available to families this year, it's really, really important to make sure that parent voices are considered. And if parents are saying they want a public, quality distance learning option because they're not comfortable with their families going back for whatever reason, then I think, we talk about the power and promise of our public education system. We need to be able to provide that. And we've learned a lot. Our teachers are incredible. They've made such great strides over the last year and a half. So now we can take that learning and really create a world-class centralized distance learning option, because kids from Ka'u could be taking classes with kids from Castle and Maui. It really doesn't matter anymore. And we have these great educators in our system. And so I think that clarity and that quality offering really needs to be available to parents next year.
Just from a practical standpoint, though, the DOE already didn't have enough teachers to staff the in-person learning. We know that there's just simply not enough teachers to do distance learning and to do in-person learning. So how would that actually happen?
So I think a big difference is, when we look at what large school districts like Miami-Dade, which is, I think, close to 3 times larger than the Hawaii DOE, is rather than making a teacher have a class full of, what are called roomers and Zoomers, right? You're teaching kids on Zoom and you're teaching kids in your class, that they're really designating, we're going to have the best distance learning teachers in our system. And again, rather than making each school figure out how to offer some kind of quality course, they're consolidating that and offering a centralized option to all of those kids and families, because that's the beauty of technology, right? Is that there's efficiency built in. So we don't have to do things that the way that we always have before. Let's get creative. We have some opportunities here. We have federal money coming in to support innovation. I think our teachers are smart enough to do it. Our schools are good enough to do it. So let's do it.
Elisa, is that possible?
I think I like the idea that we can go ahead and create and innovate. I just want to make sure that in all of this, that it's okay right now to struggle a little bit is the word I'm going to use. I don't know if it's going to be perfect, when we do it. And I think we really need to bring all of us together, have all of our voices coming in together to figure out what's the best models or the best way ahead. And let folks figure out ways to be, I guess, innovative. I want to use the word innovative because it is true. we don't have the same barriers. We don't have the walls, right? Technology can allow us this. So we have to really think outside of what we've known and really try to think of what it could be. We've got to imagine something. That's needs all of us to really think quickly and going forward, thinking about how we can best use funds and resources and our best people.
Well, I mean, the operating word there is quickly, because school's starting in a month. And so to stand up something like what David is talking about seems pretty difficult. Do you think that that will be possible given the time constraints, the financial constraints, and just the practical nature of trying to figure a system like that out?
I think we have people who have worked towards being good at distance learning. We have, the department has an e-school that they can build upon. That might be something that we could really look at expanding, and then just being really clear, of who can do this, and and how we can. I don't want to say volunteers, but I just wanted to say that we really need to have some folks who want to try this out and do this and be, in a sense, like pilots. And that it's okay, like I said, not to get out of the gates perfect, and then really working together to figure out, what kind of systems could be possibly done with this, because we're, I guess, for lack of a better word, if we're going to do this, it has to be done in a very agile way.
And in a short amount of time. Osa, I saw you raised your hand. I'd love for you to chime in on this.
Yeah, absolutely. We've needed to be proactive rather than reactive throughout this whole thing. And right now, to be in the summer and debating like, well, what shall we do for the beginning of the school year is really disappointing. We have parents who are rightfully worried that they don't want to send their students. We have some students that have thrived in this virtual lesson, these virtual things, and we have some teachers that have come up with great innovative ways. But if a classroom only has maybe 3 students who don't want to come this year, or 5, well, that's going to be hard to set that up for just that one school, because the department has said, well, call your school and see what they're going to do about it. But if we can coordinate these things, I mean, we are one statewide system. If we can coordinate these and find 3 from 10 different classes, or 10 is too many, but to find a whole group of students, we can then dedicate a teacher to teaching online for those students. And so last summer, the department did ask families, hey, what do you want to do for next year? And it's not impossible to ask that again. But right now, we're just going with no, headstrong, we're going to make everybody come in. And when the parents say, no, I don't want to do that, I'm going to pull my kid out. And that's going to have drastic effects on the school and their budget. Their budgets are going to shrink, and then they're going to lose teachers. And what we want is to have qualified teachers in every classroom in front of every student. And that's going to be jeopardized if we continue down this path.
Catherine, I'd love for you to weigh in on this.
Well, I just want to reflect back. And when we started doing distance learning, we had a program that was not effective. And we had lots of discussions in the board about the inappropriateness of that particular program. And the state curriculum specialists worked really hard to vet other programs. And we do have something that the department is buying licenses for, put out by K-12, and this is for K-8. We still don't have anything for high school, but we do have a much better curriculum for distance learning if that's what is chosen. I think we've moved in that direction. We also have some federal monies that are being used by the university to work with cohorts of teachers this summer on working on best practices for distance learning and hybrid education. And so this is being developed by teachers. So we have some momentum going with teachers who are really interested and proficient and want to get better. I think, as Osa said, we need to think about how we can hui people together and complex within a complex. And I do believe some of this is going on already. I'm just very disturbed by the all or nothing. If you don't want to do what we're doing, then you have to do homeschooling, because I feel we have a responsibility for all of our children, and we need to really make sure that we bring them back into our system. And if it takes different ways to bring them back, and during this difficult time, we need to figure out a way to do that. My expectation is that this planning has been going on in many of our schools and districts already. So there may be some that have not, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be moving forward with some differentiation for the families who are genuinely concerned and have legitimate reasons for needing to have another option.
David, I want to give you an opportunity to respond, and perhaps you can also include in your answer a response to Kesha, who writes it on Facebook. Is there data on how many families would seek a full distance option if provided? Do we know how many people actually want this? Because on the flip side, there are a lot of families who say, I got to go back to work and I need to send my young children, and I'm just not equipped, to do distance learning. I know that, I have a preschooler, and let me tell you, distance learning was pretty tough for us over the last year. So to Kesha's question, how many families do we know, how many people would actually want this?
Yeah, in terms of the planning, I've been thinking a lot about this proverb that says, I think it's an African proverb, but if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's what we need to do is, the Department of Education has already created working groups to look into the best things that have come out of this last year. So, the work has already happened, or it's done. So let's go ahead and operationalize that. In terms of the number in the department, I would love to know that. I think that would actually be a great discussion for a future Board of Ed meeting. And how are those surveys being delivered, right? Are those online surveys? Is there calls, right? Because I think a lot of people fall through the cracks, unfortunately, with our common surveying methods. I called a couple of families over the last couple of weeks, and what I thought was really interesting was that for parents who have students with special needs, their kids had some of the best years that they've ever had. They felt like they had attention and support. And for some of the stigma and the distractions that can make, school not so fun for kids with special needs, they didn't have to worry about that. So they would love some kind of hybrid or distance option. And, those kids, I think, who did thrive, I'd love to know, when we look at the models that we had across our schools this last year, what were the schools that did really well, and how many of those kids who had distance learning and different distance learning models actually achieved? Because yes, I do think there was learning loss this last year, but there are so many kids that have found that they are self-directed learners and that they enjoy the extra time with their family, and that they've gotten involved in the community and tried a new activity. Maybe they went and lobbied city council for the first time because they had flexibility in their schedule. I think there's a lot of things that could be learned from this last experience over the last year. And again, we just need to talk to our parents to understand, what those learnings are.
Alicia, I want to get your thoughts on this. It does feel like the DOE has basically presented an all or nothing option for families. What's your response to that?
I think for me, one of the things that is happening is when I've been looking at our school, what we needed was it's very uncertain time. And right now, I think what would be really helpful is to get that kind of thing that David's talking about, is that information, that data, so we know what we're looking at, because we know for sure, right, that all of our students experience disrupted learning. So us trying to really think through that part, that's what we're looking at. We know all of our students experience some kind of trauma. And so we know we have to work through that. But when you're getting to looking at these kind of things with distance learning, we need to know what's really out there that we need to tackle. I mean, that was one of the struggles we had in the thinking and the planning as we were going ahead. If we only have, like Osa said, 3 students, that's really tough for us to manage with the budgeting and whatnot. And for secondary, you're talking about a core of teachers, right, to make sure that they get to all their different subjects. And we couldn't figure out the resources around that, the teacher ability around that for just ourselves as a school by ourselves. So we would really need to have that information and then try to figure out, is there a way to, like Catherine was talking about, Hui, within our hui's, So we need to get to that place. We need information, and we really have to come back to really what's our values here going into this upcoming year.
Osa, we've been talking a lot about what the families want when it comes to whether or not to return to school. I wonder if you have a sense of how many teachers would prefer to teach from home.
I think it's a minority. Our teachers want to be with our students, but what they also want is to either be able to focus on their students in their class or to focus on students who are online. The hard part for them this past year is trying to juggle teaching students both online and in the classroom at the same time. And that really has done nothing for anybody. And so we want, if we can figure out how many of these students, and also putting them on K-12, that's basically just paying money, all this federal stimulus funds that we're taking in, we're just sending it off to some program, some company on the mainland. We could be investing that in locals here. Our teachers know what to do. The students need someone working with them. We've seen that when the students have been on programs and on their own and just left to their own devices, it hasn't worked. We need to make sure that there's a teacher that can interact and interface and give them that human touch. And so that's what I'm worried. We're running out of time to get this done.
It does feel rather late to be having this discussion about possibly surveying families and making these decisions. For the teachers, how do they appropriately plan without, we're a month out. Do they know if they're in person, if they're not in person? What are your thoughts on that?
Correct. They don't know. And it's very unnerving that we're in this situation for a second year in a row. And, we're looking to administrators like Elisa to give some guidance. But I think even administrators like Elisa, they don't know for sure what's going on. And they're waiting for further guidance up above them as well. And so we're just hoping that the right decisions get made because we've learned lessons already.
Elisa, I want to give you this question from a viewer from Kaimuki who says, for the students who fell behind from issues with distance learning, what will be done to help them catch up with the courses? Are there specific programs in place to help these students catch up? I know that, the DOE had one of the largest summer school programs in its history, so that hopefully helped a lot of students. But for students who were not able to participate or still have continued learning loss, what is going to be available for them?
I think one of the things that we were really looking at and planning out for ourselves is we talked a lot about accelerating learning. And what does that look like? That means that we have to really get to deeply know our students. So, we look at different assessments, we look at different things to understand really where they might have had a loss. And then we do what good teachers do. We go ahead and figure out how to either work within the content area and then just figure out what are these areas, maybe the foundational skills that they need so that they can achieve at the grade level they're in. And we intervene properly. I want to say appropriately is a better word. That makes it possible for us to move forward with the students.
Catherine, I want you to weigh in just in terms of the superintendent position. We know that obviously Dr. Kishimoto is stepping down. Keith Hayashi, who's the principal at Waipahu High School, will be coming in as interim. Given that we have a leadership change right at this critical time, do you have concerns about that? And what are the qualities you're looking for in replacing Dr. Kishimoto?
Well, I think Keith reflects the qualities that we're looking for the time that we have right now, which is the need to have a smooth transition. He's already working very closely to make sure that he's not starting on the first day without a full awareness of things that are going on. He's concerned also that we are at a very short time in which any kinds of changes to the mandatory everybody in school expectation will be implemented. But I think he also recognizes that there needs to be some exceptions. And I really, when I look at this, I don't see a lot of students in this situation. I think that most students want to be back, most families want to have them back, but we do need to have a plan in every complex for students who are not able to come back, a plan that is something other than just go and homeschool your child. The K-12 model, I don't see that as a model that's done without teachers. I think that that's a curriculum so that teachers don't have to, at this point, create a lot of curriculum, because there is grade level standards-based curriculum there, but we absolutely need teachers to be present and interfacing with the students as they're going through this distance process, if that's what they need to do. And it might not be for the whole year. I just don't want to turn families away at a time when we really need to embrace all of the children, because I think there are many things that schools have to offer beyond academics. We haven't talked about the kinds of other experiences that if they're on homeschooling that they would not have access to. So I think we have an obligation to make sure that we're taking care of families and children at this really difficult time.
Yeah, David, what about that balance? I know you referenced, students who might live in a more remote area, like on Ka'u on the Big Island, but, Catherine brings up a good point. Maybe they can't participate in band or in athletics and things like that. Do you think that distance learning should be made a permanent part of this system? And how do we address those other things that are met by meeting in person?
It's so interesting. Several years back, we are really focused on expanding computer science in the States. And one of the stories that really caught my eye when we looked at best practices around the country was some work happening in Native American reservations in New Mexico. And what I thought was so powerful was that you would have these nonprofits and employers come in and train local students on the reservation in all these high demand computer skills, and then connect them with employers based anywhere in the world who needed those skills. And so those students could then solve a geographic challenge that's always existed for them, because they didn't want to leave their families. They didn't want to leave their cultures, but they could never access a lot of these jobs because they just weren't physically in the community. So I think, again, this is 2021 now. We need to be thinking not about what worked over the last 200 years, but what's going to work for the next 200. And I think that's where, when it comes to innovation, we need to be thinking about creative ways to approach this. Speaking of plans with the Board of Education, something that they reviewed last meeting was the Department of Education state plan to spend federal funds, because I think we have something about 400 million plus, which is just a mind-blowing amount of money for me even to wrap my head around, specifically in support. And I think it's an opportunity to do things differently and to really innovate and try to make sure that learning can literally happen anywhere now. And so that means we need to make sure our kids have access to computers and internet connectivity. But I think we should be thinking about in terms of what the possibilities are, instead of, what do we have to get back to from 2019.
Lisa, I have a caller here from Kalihi who's a parent and wants us to discuss the protocols that will be in place for and during extracurricular activities like sports. Are there limitations for fans and parents? Will there be parents on the sidelines? Will there be potlucks allowed? I know that a lot of families like to interact there, but is that safe? And what are those, will that be complex by complex, school by school? Or how is the DOE navigating that part of the school experience?
I think it was exciting to hear that we are looking at opening up our sports, and our sports schedules are all coming back. And we've been trying to look at what's the best way to be safe about all of this. Strangely enough, I just had a band performance demonstration for our summer orchestra happen today at our school. And what we did was we adhered to our social distancing policies, made sure folks were wearing their masks, and we made sure it was as open as possible with ventilation for our students to perform. And of course, they had string instruments, so we didn't have to worry too much about blowing. But it was great to see everybody coming together and everybody doing their part to stay safe. And I think that's what we're just wanting to make sure happens, is looking at how we can do this. We even had a basketball clinic for our students just a couple weeks ago also. And that was something that parents were so excited about. And they were really good about working with us and understanding that we wanted everyone to socially distance and to adhere to those kind of things that are safe practices, right, with all of us. So I think it's possible if we're all willing to work together to keep each other safe.
Oh, so
and I apologize. I just wanted to say, we were talking about innovation. And I wonder, and this is just wondering, with the funds that we're looking at, we've been talking about, days lost. I wonder if one of the things we could possibly think about is adding days, and that would be looking at either extending school days or extending school year as a possibility, or maybe a way ahead. It would mean that we would have to pay our teachers because they are going to put the time into this, but it might be something that can help our students going forward. We don't need the school year per se to be sometimes those summer breaks, maybe it's a way to help extend things and make sure our students are getting more instructional time. As I'm just brainstorming, that was a thought that popped into my head.
Well, also,
Not married to it.
Osa, what's your take on that? And also, can you give us an update in terms of the teacher shortage? We know we had talked about that so much pre-COVID. What are the numbers like right now?
Absolutely. Well, we definitely would be open to having the discussion about extending the school year. It's something that would be interesting to have happen, because right now the state is not even funding the additional professional development hours that we have. And so basically our teachers in this upcoming school year are going to have smaller paychecks because all of that professional development is being taken away and not funded for now. So hopefully the Board of Ed may be able to do something about that later as well. As for the teacher shortage crisis, it continues to be a problem. I know many teachers who looked forward to the end of this school year because as soon as it came, they left. They left either the profession, they left the islands, and we don't know for sure. We haven't gotten that data back from the department yet, how many are leaving for this coming school year or how many have left of this. I know many teachers are happy to have retired, a bunch retired, because they're also looking, if my paycheck's gonna be smaller, then my pension's gonna be smaller. There's no sense in me sticking around then. We talk about also wanting to be innovative. We talk about wanting 21st century schools, and yet we don't offer some type of program for students. We've had a bunch of students who don't like to come onto campus. They either get bullied or it just doesn't work for them. There's no option for them. One of our charter schools, like Hawaiʻi Technology Academy, they're just growing by leaps and bounds. People want in because that's an option that people want. And so why not use these federal stimulus money now to try and build that? To try and build something statewide. As Elisa said before, we do have the eSchool platform, but that's meant for like acceleration and after school enrichment or to do things outside of the school day. We have that platform, we could build upon it. And I think there's a lot of teachers who would love that opportunity to be able to teach these innovative new ways, and students all across the state could be able to access it from, Ka'u or Hana, things like that. This technology allows so many new things, and this is the chance now to try and explore those things.
Catherine, what are your thoughts on that, about expanding programs like that? And also, given that we have suddenly, all this money the state has access to, there could be a real opportunity here.
Yes, and I think that's going to also be on the agenda for further discussion. What the board approved was the broad just request for the funds that went up to the federal government. So we are hoping to have the approval that Hawaii will be getting those funds back. There are some specific restrictions around how they are used, but that's going to be a really good discussion, I think, over the next couple of months as we think about how those monies will be spent, because it sounds like a huge amount, 400 million, certainly to all of us. But when you start parceling it out and you realize how much things cost in this huge system of 170,000 students, plus all the employees that go along with it, it's not as much as we'd like, and we still are $200 million short of our budget going forward, which is very difficult. But I think it's not just looking at this money. I think it's really looking at what we need to do long-term and in our systems. How do we change our systems to support the innovation? Because we've talked about innovation, we've talked about school empowerment for as long as I've been conscious as an educator, but we haven't really shifted the systems so that this can happen. And I think that's what we need to be talking about. What's this new system going to look like? And we have such inequity in our schools, especially where we have poverty, where we have rural facilities, that if you look at our new schools that are fully 21st century, and then you have schools that are over 100 years old, where we're still trying to get enough electricity to turn on the copy machine and the computer at the same time. So until we address equity, and particularly equity in poverty areas, we get stuck trying to take care of that, and innovation becomes very difficult. I love the idea with the Navajo reservation work that you were referencing. I think there's great potential. We seem to, the bureaucracy is just really, really tough. And I think I learned that that's been the biggest lesson of my role in this as a principal versus a board chair. You know, the bureaucracy is crushing at times and trying to move good ideas forward. But this is the time to do it. We have been through a real time of almost stagnation, but lots of good ideas brewing. Now is the time to not just go back to 2019. We just can't do that.
Well, on that point, a concerned parent here, and Alicia, I want you to take this one. It says, it was abundantly clear that Hawaii was unprepared for distance learning when the pandemic started. What has been done to address that? You know, we know the Delta variant is definitely a factor here in Hawaii. It has been found in all four counties. Hawaii has not reached 70% fully vaccinated. There's always a chance that we could have to shut schools down again and go back to, in-person or distance learning. Are we ready this next time around, this school year? Will it be different for families than it was last year?
There's been a lot of planning by all of our school principals and leadership, really trying to make sure that we can address, for lack of a better word, different scenarios, right? What would happen if there's an outbreak in a school? You know, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with something that's larger than that? And making sure that we have planned and thought through what's the way to adjust to these different situations. That's what we've all been working on through the summer. Most of the administrators that I've been hanging out with, that's what we've been really trying to think through. What's the best way ahead to address any of those different situations? And also, like I said, to open up better than we've ever opened up before, right? Addressing those things of learning and making sure that we are getting to our students, the whole child, and then making sure that we are getting to those inequities that just got highlighted so much during this time period.
Osa, from a teacher's perspective, if the schools are forced to shut down again, are teachers in a better position than they were, when the pandemic first started last March?
Well, there's no doubt that they're better than last March, absolutely. And we're grateful that the 12 and up, which is the majority of our secondary students, have access to the vaccine. So it's just a matter of our elementary school age students who are fortunately usually within the same class and cohorted. So in that sense, if something happens to a student within that class, at least you have it confined to that one class instead of at the secondary level where you have students traveling from class to class. But we do still have some at the intermediate and middle school levels who are not quite qualified yet for the vaccine.
David, what's your biggest concern, and what would you say to a parent, this parent who is writing in saying, what has been done to address the problems that we saw with distance learning? If schools have to shut down again, what are your concerns for the students and for the families?
So actually getting back to the state plan that was submitted for the federal funds, one thing that really jumped out to me, because Hawaii actually had an extension for its deadline to turn in its plan. And so by the time we had our plan to turn in, there were 30 other plans available on the US Department of Education's website. And something that jumped out to me was that Hawaii's plan was like a great meal in the sense that all the ingredients were there. High dosage tutoring, extended school day, social emotional supports, but it was lacking the recipe to really explain how these things work. And when you looked at states like Connecticut or Tennessee, as they were laser focused and those plans were clear how those funds are going to be used and what the districts were going to do in the event of all these different scenarios. I know the department said that they would come back to the Board of Education by August with more details and more specifics. So I think as parents and as community members, we really should be looking at what is being communicated at that time and how much support are schools and teachers getting? Because again, our schools and teachers are amazing, and the fact that they have done as much as they have the last year and a half is incredible, but they still need guidance, they still need support, and I think this is an opportunity using those funds to really provide some of that structure that I think that parent rightfully felt was missing this last year.
Catherine, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you'd say to this parent about, that Hawaii was unprepared and what's been done to address that over the last year.
There's been a lot of training. I think teachers are ready if they have to, some more so than others, and some, as Osa said, really took to this type of instruction. And I observed some classes. I just saw really amazing teachers doing incredible things through the computer with their students. But I do think that if we have to go back to that, we'll have more devices. That was a big scramble too. We had to make sure we had computers for every child, laptops or tablets, Wi-Fi access. So I think we have those kinds of things in place. Certainly more support from our public libraries. They've turned libraries into hotspots, so partnering up with different agencies. So we're in better shape if the unthinkable happens. I think we're also more skilled at maybe hybrid instruction, because that might be what we'd have to go back to instead of a complete shutdown, unless things really were terrible, where some of the students would come part-time, because it's really terrible to think that we might have to do this for an extended time for all our students again. I think we would lose a great deal.
We have just a few.
But we're better ready. Yeah.
We have just a few minutes left, but I want to give each of you an opportunity to share a final thought in a minute or less per person, not total. And Catherine, we'll start with you. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned throughout this pandemic, and what do you feel should continue for kids at school?
Well, I think the biggest lesson I think that we all have learned is the inequity of outcomes and services that were available to students. Students in poverty, no question, they suffered the most. Students who were not able to have a good adult at home that could help them with their learning suffered a lot. Kids that had that adult and that had enriching experiences beyond what the school was offering. They had music lessons, they had activities. They're probably okay. I don't think there was a great learning loss from them. They miss their friends, but they're probably okay. But the greatest loss is families in poverty and near poverty. And I think if that's where we need to seriously think about doing differently for all of these young people. And I would like to see the resources that are coming in really targeted in those areas.
David, if you'd weigh in with what you think we've learned and what we should keep from the last year.
I think one of the biggest challenges has been the clarity and transparency of information out to families, out to schools. But I think that this has been a once in a generation opportunity to do things differently. Our schools, all things considered, those inequities existed way before COVID, right? And now we can't deny them, as Catherine has pointed out. So let's lean into the opportunities presented by technology. Let's use our community assets, our community organizations to be real partners with our public schools, and really show that kids can learn everywhere. And I think if we're willing to have an innovative mindset going into this next year, I think we'll look back at this as a positive inflection point for our schools.
Oh, so we have less than 2 minutes, and obviously there are two of you, but we'd like to get your thoughts as well.
Our schools are quality when we have quality teachers, and we need some sort of workforce stabilization to make sure that who we have now in qualified teachers will remain and want to remain, and people will want to come to this profession. And if we don't have that, then the poorest of our students, like the students on the coast, they are the ones who suffer the most because they have this influx of teachers coming in and out, in and out, in and out. So we really need to be able to make sure that we can attract and retain quality educators.
And Elisa, in the last minute, we'll give you the final word.
I think that what's happened is that we can see that there's a lot at stake. I think what the importance of education and its place and what we believe educators can do, what education can do for our children, I think it's been highlighted how important it is and that we need to all come together to make sure that we are providing quality education, equitable education, the kind of education that has excellent teachers. So I think the biggest thing is that this has been a time period that's highlighted what's at stake. It's our children and our future. So this is important for us to have these conversations and move quickly.
Okay, well, thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. We appreciate your passion. We thank our guests, Chair of the Hawaiʻi Board of Education, Payne, Aiea Intermediate School Principal, Elisa Bender, incoming President of the Hawaiʻi State Teachers Association, Osa Tui Jr., and David Miyashiro, Executive Director of Hawaii Kids Can. Next week, right here on Insights, it's been an ongoing issue for years, parking and traffic near Laniakea Beach on Oahu's North Shore. Like other popular tourist spots in the state, residents want a solution to make the area safer as well as alleviate some of the congestion. Please do join us at our new time next week right here at 7:30. I'm Yanji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.